What's up, everyone? This is Michael from the future. Me and Danny right here basically just kind of going over COTA as a whole and just getting a little bit more instruction after we went for our first session in my M2.
We'll talk about we'll review the lap, and then we'll talk about the syllabus of what you want to do in order to become a gifted race car driver or whatever. So, turn one, at the beginning, you were braking super early. You were braking like at 200.
Yeah.
And then as you got it further into it, you're just coasting. So if you, I used to be, I'm a good instructor for you because I used to be a low confidence driver. And my approach was, when I first started doing this, I was not pushing the car at all.
Yeah.
And I gradually had to learn how to do that. And so it's a pattern I'm familiar with, and I know that held me back because I used to think of it as being like, how close am I getting to the edge, the cliff edge? And if I go a little bit past the edge of the cliff, I'm crashed. It's a disaster. And that's not what happens at all. It's not a cliff.
Okay.
It's like a hill.
Yeah.
And if you go a little bit past it, then you can just gather up the car and you lose some time, and maybe you put two wheels off or something like that. But once I built up more confidence, I started to realize that it's not a cliff and it's okay if I get close to it.
Yeah.
So seat time will help with that.
Sure.
Just experience. So one of the things I was doing is I was braking here on the back straightaway super early, or actually I was lifting super early because I didn't need to be doing 150 miles an hour in the braking zone. I could learn just as much at 100 or at 120.
And you save your brakes and everything.
So you can lift here, you can brake early, you can do anything you want.
Okay.
That's totally okay. But what our goal is to try and get you more confident and get you to push a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And you just creep up at it. Okay.
Yeah.
So heading up to turn one, there's marker boards on the wall, on the fence. You can actually see them right there.
They're over there, yeah.
And then right next to the marker boards on the arm code, there's a white stripe.
Yep, I see them.
And then on the red, on the right side of the track, there's a white stripe. On the left side of the track, there's a white stripe.
Yep.
And on the arm code on the left side of the track, there's a white stripe on the arm code as well.
Yep.
So there's tons and tons of references in all the major braking zones, including in some corners where there are no number boards, but the stripes are still there. And they're standard. They're always a 50-meter increments. So heading up the hill, in low grip situation, you probably want to brake somewhere after 150 but before 100.
Yeah.
When you're a black belt and you're pushing a car and you've got really grippy tires and you've got really good brakes, you're braking after the 100.
Sure.
And you can brake super late into turn one because you've got the hill helping you. We followed another car through turn one, and you could see, I pointed it out, they were half a car width and then eventually a car width from the edge of the track. They were giving up car width worth of turning radius in the corner. We want to be right at the edge of the track. We stay right at the edge of the track until we turn in. And then when we turn in aggressively at the beginning. We turn in relatively hard. And the goal is to get to the apex of one. If you can imagine, the apex of one is, we used to talk about early apex and late apex, but the apex of one is really, it's a point. It's not really something where you can get there early or late. So try and think of it as, what angle is your car when you touch it?
Yeah.
If your car is pointing a little bit down the hill already, then you've done a little bit more of the corner. That's the equivalent of a late apex. And the more you can get your car turned around and pointing down the hill, the earlier and harder you can get on the throttle. If you arrive at turn one and your car is still at parallel, at right angles, then you still have got a lot of turning to do, and you don't have much room to get the car turned before you run out of track. So what we're trying to do in corners that feed into important braking zone, important straightaways, is we want to get more of the turning done early so that we can get on the throttle earlier. And it's okay to give up a little bit of time in the braking zone if you gain it back in exit speed, and that exit speed carries for a long distance. So the most important corner on the track is turn 11.
And that's the one I struggle with the most too.
It feeds into the longest braking zone. So if you can be just a little bit, you can give up half a second on the entry here in order to be 5 miles an hour faster on the exit. Then that 5 miles an hour, it goes away. Eventually you reach whatever your peak speed is based off engine power and aero, but you gain time all the way down the straightaway. So first turner, you were braking too early, and then you gradually learned that as you went through the session. You're doing a pretty good job. By the end of the session, you were turning in from the edge of the track relatively late on, and then by the time you got to the apex here, you were almost 60, probably 2/3 of the way turned, which means that you can be more aggressive on the throttle and still stay on track. at the beginning you were going all the way over to the left edge of the track. You don't need to be as aggressively going all the way over to the edge of the track. The goal is to get over far enough that you can carry a lot of speed through too. And it's a low grip situation, so it's probably better to be a little more aggressive about getting over. And we on the exit of 2, we were at the left edge of the track a lot because you just didn't have enough grip
to continue to keep it tighter.
To keep tighter. But what you should be doing is you should be clipping the rumble strip on the inside here, getting to the outside edge. You're going because you got to be going as fast as you can and still stay on track. And then keep sweeping back over this direction and get about 2/3 of the way back over to the middle of the track again. You don't. Some people go all the way out to the edge here, but you just have to go about 2/3 of the way over. If you go all the way over, that's better too than
not enough.
Not enough. But the ideal spot's probably about 2/3 of the way over. When you just before the bridge, you want to be about 2/3 of the way over. And then you can start to turn in for 2. The further over here you are on this side of the track, the easier turn 3 becomes, and the further out to the the left side of the track you are for the turn in of 4. So being further over here puts you faster through both 3 and 4. 5. There's a very common mistake. You did it in small amount, but it's a minor thing that we'll focus on later. Sometimes people turn too much going through 5. And
then you have to turn back in again.
You end up turning more this way, which forces you to turn
again
more
harder.
That way to get back.
Yep.
So as you're on the exit of 5, you just turn the car enough
to keep it to where you aim to
where
the
the right wheels of your car are just touching the rumble strip here. And then you go out wide and then you go back in again. And the goal is to get to the right edge of the track for 7 so that you've got the maximum turning radius for 7. So that's why you go out wide and then get back in again, because you're trying to force your car over here so that you can carry more speed through 7. 7, the common mistake that I see in 7 is people turn too far. It's the same thing as 5. They turn too far, they end up way
over to the left,
and the car is pointing too much this way, which means they still have a lot of turning to do for 8. So you just turn the car enough that you can get
pointed.
You can get the car in a straight line. You have to brake here a little bit, but you brake in a straight line with your right wheels just planning to intercept the edge of the rumble strip at the start of 8, and then you hug 8 all the way up the hill. What you did a couple of times there was that you didn't turn quite enough, and you ended up out on the right edge of the track before we got to 8. And your car was pointing a little bit, so you still had to do a little bit of turning, and you basically ran out of room there. You didn't turn enough. If you go into 8 too fast, you will not be able to hug the right edge, and you will end up over on the left edge on the entry to 9. 9 becomes a much tighter corner. So you want to hug the right edge of 8, and you have to slow the car down enough to be able to do that. So which is why you do a little bit of braking here in 8 on the way in. Turning enough on 8. So you want to turn 8 until you want to hug the right edge and keep turning, and there's a grandstand here and there's a cell tower behind it, which is pretty easy to see.
And you aim for the...
So when your car is turning where it's pointing directly at the cell tower, you have to go just a little bit further.
Gotcha.
But for me, when I'm pointing at the cell tower, that's my reference for
turn the other way. I gotcha.
I start straightening the wheel, and I want to take a big bite of the apex of 9. And I want to be able to get on the throttle relatively early. And it's a very low grip situation in the rain today, but if you do it right, you can get on the throttle here.
I was able to when I drove my dad's GT3 in the
and then you can carry it all the way down to the braking zone of 11. You want to be on the exit of 9. You want to be on the right edge out here. There are 3 potential references for turning in. There was one lap where you turned in way too early, and as a result, you pinched yourself on the exit of 10. But if you turn in at the right time, and it's blind, you can't see it when you're turning in, you can carry full throttle through there.
I was able to in the Porsche.
That's a confidence thing that it takes some people it takes them a while to get to where they can do that. It depends on how much power you've got in your car, how much grip you've got. But if the 3 references are, what I used to use is there was a pathway on the side here, and I would brake. Sorry, I don't brake here. I would turn in about a car length or so after the pathway. The other reference is you can actually see the bridge. And that bridge was added, 3 years ago, and the turn is just a little bit after the bridge. So now you actually have a better idea where the corner is, so you can kind of judge it. But the best reference by far is you look out into the distance.
You see the house drop below,
and when the house no longer touches the bottom of the bridge, that's your turn-in point.
Gotcha.
And then you can keep, accelerating all the way out to the right edge of the track here, and then break in a straight line here. You were turning in a little late for 11 a few times.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
I think part of it is since it's a little, like this one is uphill, this one's a little bit downhill, I think too, and so I misjudge it in my head a bunch of the times as well about when to, how much pressure and when to let off and all that stuff.
So we talk about not having your tires on the paint because the paint's lower grip.
Yep, and we had that over there too. Yeah.
So the paint is lower grip, and that only matters in situations where you're demanding a lot of grip.
Yeah.
So if you touch the apex in the S's, it's with the unloaded wheels, so it doesn't matter so much. If you touch the S's at turn-in, you touch the paint at turn-in, then at the beginning you're not turning a lot. You don't need a ton of grip. You're trying to get to it, but by the time you get to it, unless your car's way deep into the paint, you're going to be off the paint before you really do demanding a lot of grip.
Yeah.
But the place where it really matters is braking. So if you come down into 11 and you've got 2 wheels on the paint and 2 wheels on the asphalt, and you get hard on the brakes, that's when you get asymmetric grip, and that can destabilize the car, and the car can start to turn.
Which is not fun.
The left side of the car's got more grip than the right side, and the car will start to swing. So that's where you need to be off the paint. You're turning in a little too late at 11 at the beginning, and then we've got a little bit better towards the end. We're trying to trade off here. We do a heavier turn at the beginning, so that by the time we get to the pointy apex, we want the car to be pointing a little bit down the straightaway. We want the car to not be at 90 degrees. We want to have 2/3 of the corner done, so that you can get on the throttle and start to straighten the wheel. So there's a gradual opening curve as you go through it. There's an awning over the top of the track here. So I, sometimes when I'm taking people out, I'm demonstrating stuff, and I'm trying to just demonstrate in the cleanest, calmest, and I'm not pushing the car. I lift there.
Yeah.
And when I was a lesser confidence driver, I would lift at the awning, just coast
for a
down
while.
until the braking zone.
Yeah.
The ideal turn-in point, there's a 50-meter line, just relatively easy to find.
And then there's the last one. You said at 25.
So about
halfway through.
About 25 is the right spot. What I'm doing is I'm using visual references for everything. So my turn-in point here at 11 is 3 squares before the end of the...
3 squares before that long white one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So over here, it's hard to count 8 squares.
Yeah.
I can count 2 or 3 squares. I can count 1 square. But it's easy to estimate the middle of between this line and that line. So that's why
just aim for that.
That's why I picked the 25.
Okay.
It's kind of it's a good turn-in point that's about the, it's relatively easy to estimate.
I see.
And then you were turning in a little later.
Yeah.
The way you can tell that you're turning in too early, too late is whether or not you run out of room on the exit. If you run out of room on the exit, you turned in too early because you had less turning done when you got to the apex.
Yeah.
If you don't run out of room, you don't need all of the track. You turned in too late because by the time you get to the apex, you've already done
75% of it. Yeah.
And the ideal is somewhere in between. To where you can get on the throttle aggressively, and just barely keep it on track.
Yep.
And when you do that, in turn 12.
It'll shoot you back over, right?
Sweeping over, back over to the left edge of the track for 13. There's a 50-meter board on the wall. There's a 50-meter stripe on the edge of the track, and I want to get my car back over there just a little bit before the 50. If I get there way early, then that means I compromise my exit of 12, and I slow down too much to turn too fast and get back to. You want to be accelerating out of 12 and just barely get it back over to the left edge of the track
before that 50.
And I want to be there before the white line because I want my braking and turning to be as calm and deliberate as possible.
Sure.
And if I'm barely making it in time, then I have to be perfect. And perfect is too high of a standard. I'm not perfect. I'm not going to be able to do that. So I prefer to get there just a little bit early so I can straighten the car and then put an eye on where I'm going to hit the brakes and then put an eye on where I'm going to turn in from. But you hit the brakes just for a little bit, just after the 50-meter line. Maybe a little earlier for today because the grip level is lower. But although the grip level is lower, we're going a little slower too. So maybe it's
finding the balance between
and then turning from a little bit later. You asked about on the brake. You put. Sometimes you'll do what's called trail braking, which is you get a little bit of brake efforts, like 5, 10, 15% braking, That puts more weight on the front of the
wheels
car,
to be able to turn
and it helps turn it in.
Yeah.
And that's a more advanced technique. I don't know if you want to do that today. Or
I've tried it a bit before. I'd like to learn better.
Practice it in the sim as well.
I've not been able to do well with trail braking in the sim.
Yeah.
I can't for some because I don't feel it the same way that you feel it in the actual.
So
car, you know?
So the thing about trail braking is you have to brake less than you used to.
Yeah.
Because you're saving a little bit of your braking for while you're turning the car in, and then you have to smoothly get off the brake and time it just so that you're at the turn-in point.
Yeah.
So you got the maximum bite on your front wheels when you're using the grip the most, and then you gradually lift as you make it. As you demand less of the steering.
Yeah.
You can start to lift and then try and get on the throttle. The goal is to be on the throttle as early as possible in the important corners.
Yep.
If you're the best in the world at being the last of the late breakers, and I'm the best in the world at getting on the throttle early, you're going to be faster than me in turn 11 in the braking zone, and you're going to gain time on me for at least 10 or 20 meters. But I'm going to be faster than you all the way down the back straightaway. I'm going to gain back a lot more.
So you're making the straight longer, essentially, right?
So if you want to, I'm making it shorter because I'm going faster.
Oh, okay.
Because I have a speed advantage over you all the way down. So if you want to get faster, it's far more important that you get comfortable with feeling the limit of the car and getting on the throttle early than you're trying to be as brave as possible and get on the brakes circulation.
Sure.
And while you're learning, it's a smart idea to actually be more conservative with your braking. Get on the brakes a little less hard but a little earlier so that you can arrive at the turn-in point feeling completely in control of the car and not just oh my god, am I going to make it, no, I just barely made it. If you can arrive there in a calm, controlled manner and turn in deliberately and aggressively so that you can trail brake into the apex and then get on the throttle early. So it's a good technique to just be less aggressive on brakes so that you can be more aggressive on the throttle, and then dial in your brakes once you've gotten figured out how to take the corner at speed. 15. So we had a disconnect there.
We had two different ways
of doing it. I like my way better than the other guy, but I mean
there's different lines.
There's different lines. There's different approaches to it. A downforced car will do a much more curvy corner, a big turn. So,
we don't have any of that.
So a downforced car will basically. I watched one, a map of a Formula 1 car going through 15, and it's like a circle.
Yeah.
We
don't have that.
They're out of the edge here. They've clipped the apex, and they're all the way. It's a big smooth circle. But for us, we have. We don't have as much downforce. We have a little, but not much.
Yeah.
So for us, we bias the curve a little bit more. And I have a diagram for that in a minute. We're running out of time here.
Yeah.
So that you can get on the throttle early and then carry it through here.
Yeah.
So for this guy here,
carousel,
you want to turn in from. I think you're turning in from a pretty good point.
Yeah, missing the first apex and trying to hit the last two.
So hit this one.
Yep.
You were getting out pretty wide on the left edge here, and then not getting back to the right edge of the track.
Quick enough.
I think it might work better if you can do that because you're not doing a great job on 19.
Okay.
So there's
19 is also one of my hardest ones when I'm in the sim.
Yeah. So there's a white stripe for the 50 meters right here. And what I'd like to do is get the car back to the right side of the track before you get to it. And at the 50 meters, you brake just at the board or just before it, just before the line, and then you turn in just after it.
Yeah, and we're off the gas. We're just coasting as we turn for that one?
So, I mean, maybe eventually you'll trail brake, but for today, let's just focus on getting the car over just a little bit earlier so that you can get it straight. And then, by the way, the way you're doing it is you're arriving to the turn-in point at this angle, but I want you to get over a little bit earlier.
Straight line.
A little less turning to do.
I see what you're saying.
And then turning from it at the beginning, it'll feel super early, but you've got a ton of room on the outside here. So when you've got more room here, you can carry more speed through the corner, which means you can turn in earlier. Which means by the time you get to the apex, you've done a little less turning.
I gotcha.
And then last corner, you get to the right edge of the track, look for the pathways, my visual reference, brake in a straight line, and then turn in from, probably 3 squares from the end.
It's weird. It feels so much different when it's dry versus when it's wet.
Common mistake here is
people
power too early. Are you having them check your flag for this session? End of the session?
No. this is a
we're under checker right now. We will be doing it at the end of the 25 minutes. And you will can...
Two biggest danger spots on the track are here and here. So here, what happens is people try and Ironman it. You know, they're going through the corner, not going to make it, not going to make it. They stay on it, and then eventually the back of the car comes around.
Oh, and then they go straight into it over here.
And then it grips up. You know, you slide for a while, and then the car grips up and it starts heading this way towards the left wall.
Not fun.
And then it's the same thing here in 9. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. You're going. What you should do in those situations is you just open the wheel and catch the car. But they're keeping turning. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it.
Yeah, and then that doesn't work.
And they panic and lift off the throttle. You lose a lot of the weight shifts forward. The front grips up. The rear loses a lot of grip, and then the car turns violently. You slide for a bit, and then it grips up, and you're in the wall.